Hey there everybody, this is Mike Pearl from the National Tech Team. In this video I'd like to go over the new email automation feature that we are introducing shortly, and specifically how to actually create one. In order to understand the guidance of when to use this tool and the most effective practices and whether or not it's going to be approved, you'll want to go look at the SharePoint page that we've set up for those guidelines, and that is at trusa.co/email automation. All one word, all lowercase. If you go to this page, this has all the actual guidelines, left and right limits, best practices, what to do, what not to do, etc. So this video will not focus on these because these are likely going to change over time. So instead we're going to focus on how to actually create one, what it looks like from the user standpoint, as well as then a second video for what it looks like from the approver standpoint. So let's go ahead and get started. So the first thing you're going to want to have is a list of recipients. So there's two main mechanisms to do that. You can either create a view of contacts, for example, either using advanced find or picking something that already almost exists and then editing it a little bit to get a list of contacts that you're going to email. Or the other mechanism that can be useful is if you already have an event that has a number of registrants in it and you are trying to update the registrants on that particular event, then there's a second way of easily talking to those people as well. So just for the sake of the training, I'm going to go ahead and create my own view here. And my example is going to be targeting, let's say that there's a course coming up that has light attendance and we're trying to get more people interested in going. And so, we want to put out a call to action to try to beef up the audience of that particular course before we have to end up canceling it. So in my fictitious scenario here, I'm going to say I want to talk to just the people in the Pacific Northwest. So we'll add that filter. And I want to talk to, let's say it's an advanced Sawyer 1 class. So the only people that are eligible for that are the people that already have Sawyer 1. And I also want to filter to say I don't want people that already have advanced Sawyer 1. So we can say does not equal yes. And now we're down to 149 people. So that's better than the 170,000 we have in the system and enough that we can put out kind of a broadcast. Obviously there's ways to get a lot more detailed than this. This little filter button here will bring up a little editor where we can add some additional things. So instead of just the geo area being the Pacific Northwest, if I wanted to make this a smaller audience, I could go by metro instead. And I can pick a few of the local metros here. So Seattle, Kitsap, Tacoma, let's say Everett. So if I apply that filter, now we're down to 44 people, and that's a lot better of an audience. It's more focused, more likely to get people that are close enough to go to the event. I'm going to add one more because I want people that have logged in recently. So we're going to go down to last roll call login. We're just going to say that they've logged in at some point this year. Now we have 21 people. So we have this list of contacts. These are the people that we want to create an email automation record for, which simply means these are the people that we want to email. So if I select one or more of these people, and I'm going to uncheck a few people just to show another feature. Let's say we want these 17 people. Now I have this option up here at the top that says create email automation. So notice that I'm not in here just for the sake of training. I'm going to hit create email automation. It's going to open a second tab and start the process of creating this record that will eventually turn into an email. Now because I am the creator of the email automation record, even though I didn't select myself, it is going to add me to the list so that I am one of the recipients that gets the email, just so I know that it went out, that it looks correct, etc. And it may not add me immediately, looks like it did in this case. Sometimes the person will show up a little bit later after a few seconds. If you hit refresh, you'll see yourself show up in that list. So we're going to start at the top here and then work our way around the field of view. At the top is a little bit of a toolbar, and specifically the send for approval and do not send buttons will come into play here shortly when we're done and we feel like we want to seek approval. So those are really the only two that we have to worry about up there. We have three tabs across the top: the general tab, the admin tab, and any related items. For now, you don't have to worry about what's in the admin tab. Most of these are probably going to be hidden, but we're keeping them out for troubleshooting purposes. So we'll start in the upper left here. If we want to, we can rename this to be something more specific. So I'm going to say Advanced Sawyer 1 CTA Seattle area. That just helps me and the approver, when we're looking at a big list of email automations later, remember what this one was. Type of communication is important. And by the way, you can hover over any of the labels here to get a tooltip that will tell you what the intent of that field is. So if we hover over type of communication, it says choose the most appropriate use case for this email. So this is the reason we want to send the email, and we've got a few different options here. So in this case, it's a call to action for a training that we're trying to put on. So I'm going to go ahead and pick call to action training. The other options are to update registrants at an operation or a non-op event, which would come into play in another example that we'll provide potentially in a different video when we're emailing registrants. We've got 4 different calls to action: training, service projects, engagement events, or leadership opportunities. And then we have other, which should hopefully almost never be used, because we'd like to find out what all the right categories are and then add the right category. This field helps us understand later on why these emails are being sent, so that we can help further tailor everything and make it easier for our volunteer leaders to communicate. So 4 different call to action options here. Note that there's no CTA for any operation event, because that is still going to be handled only by National Mobilization or their delegates. It's going to be handled in a different system. So this system is not to be used for any call to action for operations, at least in the beginning. And that's the only guideline I'll give you, simply because it's missing from this list. Otherwise, go look at the guidance on this SharePoint page. Then we need a description of the recipients, and this is basically a note to the approver to say this is why these people are showing up in this list. And so for this example, I'm going to say some kind of quick blurb as to who these people are. So the reasoning for wanting to send this email, this is all for the approver to observe, to be able to look at this and then make a determination on if that's appropriate use of this particular tool. So then we have a timeline tool, and this is basically for notes to go back and forth between whoever is creating this record and the approver. So you basically put in whatever you want and then hit add note. And it just makes it visible on this record, so anybody looking at this record later on will have the ability to send notes back and forth. This section here is mainly for troubleshooting at the moment. We'll likely hide it at some point, so that'll come into play a little bit later. And then we have our list of the people that we created that view for. So these are the people who have SAW 1 but not AS1 yet, that are in the Seattle area based on that view that we created. So if this list of people looks accurate, then the next step is to actually craft the email. So we've got a few fields here to talk about. The first is the from name. This is the name that's going to show up in the email that people receive. So for the most part, it will likely be you. However, if you have authorization to send on someone else's behalf, then you can put their name, their email address, etc. The reply to address is where any replies to that email would go to. And so you may want it to be you, or you may want it to be one of the several shared inboxes that we have across the branches. Again, you'll want to have authorization to have it be someone other than you. The start date and time is important because this allows us to either schedule a specific time in the future for this email to go out, because there are specific times of day where emails are more read than others. So you could have some strategy around that. Or if you set it to any time in the past, then it will basically go out almost as soon as it gets approved. So that part is important to know. If it's in the past, it's going to go out immediately. Then we'll pick a time zone. And then we need a good subject line. So something a little bit catchy. Again, use the other page for guidance on what some of this stuff should entail. Then we have the actual email body itself. So there's a couple different ways that we can fill this out. You can, if you want, just start typing here and, type whatever the message is, or it might be a little bit easier if you hit the expand button. It's going to take up basically full screen, and it gives you a little bit more access to some of these in case you're on a smaller monitor to be able to craft your message. So I'm going to go ahead and pause the video, and I'll put something in here that might be close to something that might be sendable, and then we'll pick it up again in a moment. Okay, now that I have some words here, let me show off some of the features of this rich text editor, which is hopefully going to make life a little bit easier, but does have a couple gadgets. So first of all, the text that I put in here, I've already increased the size just so hopefully it's readable on the video. So to do that, you would obviously select whatever text you want and then click on the text font size. There's also a couple different fonts to choose from. You have your normal bold, italic, underline. We can change the color of the background and the color of the actual text itself. We've got bulleted lists, numbered lists, left, middle, and right justification, and the ability to send a link. The rest of these you can play with if you want, but I want to kind of snazz this up a little bit. So let's make that red, because canceling is bad. And maybe we want to have a list instead. So if I edit this and then start a bulleted list, notice that sometimes it will bring the mouse back up to, or the cursor up to the upper left like it just did. So you have to be on the lookout for that. That is something that we don't have any control over. It's part of this tool. Clean that up a little bit. Just for fun, I'm going to make this bold and red. And then we have a link here that what we can do instead for links is we can embed them into some text if we want. So I'm going to grab this, click on the link tool, give it the URL, and notice when I hit OK, it's going to put it up here. So that is something that this rich text editor just does, but you can still drag it to wherever you want. So here is the link. I'm going to make that bigger and more obvious. And now we have our email. So this particular tool does have a couple gotchas. Watch for the cursor to post up here. And also, as soon as I save it, it's going to introduce some additional, potentially some additional spacing. So just be on the lookout for that. Sometimes this kind of expands and contracts a little bit because of things that it's doing in the background as it creates the HTML for it. But in this case, it looks good, and so we have our email body. So once this all looks accurate, go ahead and save it, and now we'll go back up to the top here. If you then want to get approval for this email to go out, you would click on Send for Approval. If you're changing your mind and there's no chance that you want this to go out, or it was declined and we just need to clean it up, then you would hit the Do Not Send button, and that will deactivate the record just so it's not cluttering up the list. So in this case, I'm going to go ahead and hit Send for Approval, and then we'll talk about the approval process in a second video, which should be coming up shortly. I also plan on having another video, which we'll link here, that goes into a little bit more detail on how to create some of these views so that we can get down to specifically the people that we're trying to target for whatever the type of communication is for these emails. Thanks a lot. This has been video 1, and look for the next video.